before we start our presentation, I just wanted to say why it's very special for me personally to be here. One of the first design competitions that I won in school was in India, and it was a poster that I designed for the anti-apartheid movement in South Africa. I still remember the slogan. It said, "Black or white, blood is red." I was part of the South Africa Club, and we were very active supporters of Nelson Mandela and the ANC. I distinctly remember singing Nkosi Sikelel' iAfrika. I didn't understand a word of it, but I sung it with a lot of passion. This instilled at a very early age a sense of our world and thinking globally and internationally at a very young age. The India that I grew up in was a third world country in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. It was a post-colonial world, and you're probably wondering why the bra packaging. This is just to demonstrate the level of consumerism. This was the only bra brand that was available in the country. So if you weren't a Duchess, Empress, Princess, or Dolce Vita, you probably didn't have anything else to wear. It's not the India that we see now, which is in the news everywhere. We can't escape it. It's an India that's ready to share its contemporary culture with the rest of the world. It's an India which has a new, confident sensibility and identity. This is Nokia's recent campaign for its 1100 phone in India. And it really shows the shift of India and its relationship with the world, where Nokia have actually designed a phone which is called the Nokia 1100, made for India.
Well, my background is not as colorful as Nippa's. I had a very comfortable, a very privileged, idyllic English upbringing. I wasn't the academic type. I had no desire to do A-levels. But I love making. And at 16, I began with fine cabinet making. And it was through my hands that I began to understand the world around me. My design education was focused very much on problem solving, technology, applying good form to ideas. But it wasn't until I met Nippa at the Royal College of Art that, and this is our studio, and until we set up Doshi Levien, that I saw a fabulous opportunity opening up before me. And this was an opportunity to apply my European design experience with somebody coming from a completely different culture and background.
My first degree was at the National Institute of Design in Ahmedabad, which was founded on the recommendations of Charles and Ray Eames in 1963. Unfortunately, the manifesto was absolutely beautiful about what design could do for the Indian people, but our school instead chose to follow the Bauhaus and Ulm School of Design. It was very confusing for me because, you know, what we were learning in school actually did not reflect the world outside, which was very celebratory, chaotic, and rooted in a plurality. So while we were learning how to make brown coffee makers, lookalikes, you know, people outside were actually making chai on an open flame in a stainless steel pot. It was really, you know, a country where you would see a Mercedes-Benz with a cow and a cycle rickshaw on the road. You have shanty towns and slums right next to very modern glass buildings. So when I came to Europe and I went to London, I really didn't know what I could contribute to a country and society that had everything. Everything seemed designed and it seemed perfect. And at this point, I really started exploring what can I contribute from my culture to the world. Is there a way that I can introduce a sensual and celebratory approach as opposed to the reductionist kind of Western idea of design being about problem solving? And this is where, at the Royal College, I really started to explore how, in terms of culture of well-being, the visual culture, cinema and storytelling, India could have a lot to offer to the world.
So Our relationship and friendship is based very much on working together from the outset at the Royal College of Art. Nipper was very Indian and forthright, I have to say, and an exacting critic of my work. And she was the opposite to my tactful English politeness. And she actually said to me once that I can't be your friend if I don't respect your work. Isn't that mean? Well, to be honest, I wasn't really applying myself at the time, so I probably deserved that. We've chosen 5 projects that best demonstrate the plurality underlying our work. It all began, I think, on a research trip to India in 2000. I was keen to find out what effort the multinational companies were making in India to adapt to local culture. There were a handful of big names such as Philips, Moulinex, and there was Tefal, who were the largest producers of non-stick cookware in the world. And they were selling European cookware in a country that has a very strong food culture of its own. So on our return to London, we proposed to them to look at the social changes occurring in India, to design a contemporary range of cookware suited to the contemporary Indian way of life.
Well, they came back to us and quite reversed the brief, because India was too niche, and it was 2000. It still wasn't very important, and they suggested that we design cookware inspired from cuisines around the world for the American and European market. So this is a kadhai, for example, which was traditionally made out of mild steel and used to gather a lot of rust. So we made it using cast aluminium with Bakelite handles and a steam release on the top. And you'll be surprised, actually, Jonathan's father uses it to make scrambled eggs. This is a tagine also where we took the authentic tagine is actually made out of terracotta, which bursts on a gas hob. So we did keep the ceramic aspect of it in the lid, for example, and had a glass-filled nylon tip, and the base is a fluor-turned aluminium. Just to go through, this is the wok for Chinese food, the fajita pan for Mexican cooking, and that's the range combined together.
And we made the point to Tefal at the time that technology is widely available throughout the world. What is left to distinguish the Tefal brand from any other brand? Yes. And we think the answer lies in forming an emotional connection with the customer by emphasizing the cultural aspect of design, not just the technology.
Tefal, if you've seen their pots, normally print a very technological pattern on the base, which doesn't really mean anything. And we really encourage them to actually print the patterns that related to the culture of the cuisine the pots originated in. We also really persuaded them to not necessarily use black non-stick, which kind of looks very cheap and throwaway. So we invested a lot of time in actually developing colors of non-stick which were more food and culture orientated, like a deep brown and aubergine. There are many ways in which a project may come about. And for example, in the case of Tefal, we made a social and cultural observation, and that led to an industrial design project. But there are also projects which literally come out of the blue, and sometimes they're even from companies that we've never heard about. And this was the case with the Wellcome Trust. The Wellcome Trust is the world's largest medical research charity. They give away £1 million a day. And it was founded by Henry Wellcome, who was an anthropologist, a biomedical person, and he actually has a collection of 1 million objects that he collected in his lifetime, which are to do with health and well-being around the world. So his collection would be as much about African healing masks as it would be about medical instruments. So basically, we had two 12-meter windows.
Do you want to go back to that one?
Yes.
Okay.
So one of them we called a set window, and the other one was the word window. So because the Wellcome Trust is about health and well-being, we said, okay, well, the first question we are going to ask, as if the building's talking to you, is how are you? It's a question we ask each other every day, but we never really give a true answer. And so when you're driving past, that's all you see. But if on closer look, if you look at the window, it says, tell me how are your genes? Tell me, are you eating well? How are you today? How natural are you? How are you made, for example? And right next to that, we had a well-being center, a fictitious well-being center. And we'll just pan across the window. So, I mean, this is also 12 meters long. You can just see one half of it. So we created almost a doctor's surgery with a doctor who is a magical creature, who could be an African healer, could be a Chinese doctor, and he wears a stethoscope that can not only listen to your heart, but also your soul, and can speak to you. On the privacy screen, we embroidered the aim and the objectives of the Wellcome Trust. Then we had medicine jars with modern human ailments, for example, neighbor repellent cream, shopaholic tonic.
Duplication drops, you know, when you're really busy, you need another one of you.
Anger solvent, and all kinds of silly medicines, really. The idea of this project really was to combine technology with storytelling, and to really engage people at a level where you're not showing them intestines and, you know, ill people, because that's not what people really need to see. The whole project, we had a team of around 12 people, including theater set makers, scenic artists, industrial designers, and actually the pitch that we made to the Wellcome Trust was in the form of a miniature painting, which is very much the way I draw, and I don't really understand perspective. So I draw things as I imagine that they are, rather than what they really look like. And I think they translated quite well into the set because we had quite a narrow space. Do you want to show some of the objects? So these are just some of the objects that we created specially for the installation. And it was the first time really that we created objects that were useless in the way they were non-functional objects, but using very much the skill that we use to create other industrial design objects. So that's a doctor's bag with crystals with the power of healing. That's the stethoscope, and you can see the loudspeaker that can speak to you. That's a healing dress to talk about a project that the Wellcome Trust funds. And I don't know if you can see, but there are little silk bandages embroidered onto the dress. And it's a project called My Skin, where they've funded research where you can use your own skin to heal other parts of your body. So this to show that then we had around 16 months to show our project, and we had to change the display every 4 months. And just also to say that all this work, you know, some of the graphics were created on the computer. They were meticulously hand painted. So when you walked closer to it, there was another layer that you could really enjoy. And this one's called curiosity funding, because that's what the Wellcome Trust do. And we kept the eyes as a symbol of curiosity. They fund exceptionally curious people.
So we have in the Cafe of Curiosity, we have the financially independent Times on the top left. And
to say that the Wellcome Trust doesn't need any money.
Yeah.
Then we had no donations, thank you. Then another sign said, we don't sell drugs. A lot of people think they're a pharmaceutical company. And then we had a menu board which said, like, they give away £100 million a year for the malaria initiative. So really the cafe was about where do they actually give their money.
And these tables that you see are actually zoetropes, which are animations created by Edward Muybridge in like late 1800s. The Wellcome Trust have a very large kind of photographic library related to health and well-being, and they own all of these images. So we wanted to bring these to the public in the form of these tables in the cafe.
So these tables are actually rotating in space, the pink table and the yellow table, for example.
So we had the Galloping Horse by Edward Muybridge.
So basically through the slots in the table, and the tables are actually eye height. So you could see animations inside. And man doing a forward flip, for example. And this was the final window installation, which said Recipe Book of Life, which is about the Human Genome Project that they fund. And it's basically an open book with 24 chapters, which is the chromosomes we have in our body. And the glasses were branded X and Y to show the male and female chromosome. And the set window that we created for that was a kitchen, because that's how scientists describe human genetics. It's the Recipe Book of Life. And there were different aspects of the genetic projects that they sponsor in it.
Okay, so not long ago, the British Council invited us to create a new body of work for Experimenta, the design biennale based in Lisbon. And the theme was My World, and it was about the new subjectivity in design. It was about personal narrative in design. We wanted to create a world that was like a new country, consisting of values and objects that result from the hybridisation of different cultures and manufacturing techniques. And it was a kind of liminal space between India and Europe, between high technology and fine craftsmanship, and between pleasure and work. And our concept was inspired by the open-fronted, stone-floored shops as seen in the old markets in Ahmedabad, in India, where you take off your shoes and you enter another person's world. And it's a world where people have time for each other.
This is just an example of the shop. This is a jewelry shop.
And the interaction that you experience when you enter a space like this is very personal, and it's as much about a social interaction as it is about the commercial interaction.
And we thought this could be a very good metaphor for the exchange of values from one culture to another.
So we created a space that contained prototypes for manufacture. And this is a matelot, and you still see these in their original form in India.
And lots of different parts of the world, not just India, even in Portugal and in Africa.
And they used to store drinking water, and not only does the water taste really nice coming from one of these things, but it's also cooled by up to 14 degrees through the natural evaporative process. This one we designed with 2 chambers, and you pour the water in the top, and it goes through 2 diatomite filters and then into the base chamber where it's cooled and, until you're ready for drinking. And this really interests me in particular when a seemingly low technology material like clay can have a high performance capability. And we also thought this could be a really excellent replacement for all the electric water coolers that you find in offices. The marble table, as part of that collection, is taking the typology of an archetypal work desk and suggesting the possibility for the work environment in which many people spend most of their working days to be more sensual and more tactile and more natural.
The table basically is to sit cross-legged on the floor and work from, so it's not a high table. You imagine it's a low table.
And the fan here is made of mirrored plastic. And the idea was to take the identity of a space in which it's placed. So you feel the effect of the cool air of the fan, but you don't really see the object, and it takes on the identity of the space in which it's installed.
While we were creating some of these, you'll see another piece we created for this installation. I was actually working in India with a workshop, and it was June and it was very hot, and most people now in India, like everywhere in the world, just wear jeans and a lot of synthetic fabrics. And I wanted to, and I was really, really hot in June. It was like 45, 47 degrees Celsius. And I wanted to explore what were people traditionally wearing in this heat. What were the materials that you can find indigenously? And I worked with this fabric called malmal, which is the finest cotton that you can buy from Bengal and from Bangladesh. It's hand-spun and hand-woven. And mango is a color of summer, and traditionally a lot of dresses were dyed the mango color, called kesari. So I wanted to create a dress which, for a contemporary Indian person to wear in this heat. And this is very much inspired from a courtesan's dress, where it's as much about how much you reveal can be as sexy as what you hide. And 6 meters of fabric, and it literally, you feel like you're wearing a cloud when you wear it. Which brings us to one of our recent projects that we created for Moroso in Italy. We were basically invited by Patrizia Moroso to create a collection based on our work for Experimenta. We really wanted to combine something that, to create something that combined the fine craftsmanship of Indian master craftswomen with fine industrial production of Italy. And also what we did is we created a new business model for a supplier in India to work directly without agents and middle people with the client and the brand that they were selling to. And this, I think, also was very much about the unity of opposites. I'll just tell you a little bit about the workshop in India that make these pieces. It was founded by my aunt in 1996 as a way to provide employment to women in the local community so that they don't have to go very far to work, which is, as you know, a problem endemic to China, where people have to leave their communities and go and work in factories. So for me, this is also a form of sustainability where you don't take people out of their communities to go and work in areas that they don't know. So we basically took the ubiquitous Indian furniture piece called the charpoi, which literally means 4 legs, and we embroidered the game of chopar on the daybeds as a way to say that the daybed can be a social place where you sit and spend time together. So the game of chopar, for any one of you who know the Mahabharata and the Gita, led to the biggest mythical war, the Mahabharata in India. And it was basically a war between 2 families which was lost in the game of chopar. And the opponents were actually cousins, and as one of the prizes, they waged their wife. So here, the opposite cousins are disrobing the wife, and Krishna standing there giving her eternal sari, so they were not able to disrobe her. So for every Indian person, this game, they know about this game. So I kind of really wanted to use it as an icon. Along with the daybeds, we also did cushions, which were called tools of inspiration, which started from the tools that the craftswomen actually used to make their work. But then it extended to pieces that we'd collected from our travels around the world, very utilitarian objects. Each one of them is meticulously handcrafted. So for example, we have a bottle by Tord Bunche that he did for Transglass. We have an American milk bottle.
We have some chai making equipment there on the red one on the top right. And actually we had the show, we had a show in New York, and there were some people trying to figure out the use of these objects, and they thought it was cocktail making equipment. So.
But I think that this project for me was a prime example of how globalization can also be about an equal exchange of cultures. And because globalization is normally seen as a destroyer of local cultures, but Jonathan and I really see it as an opportunity for an exchange.
And, this is our tagline as a studio, and it's the idea that best quality. You see this printed on most Indian artifacts exported from India on the stainless steel goods. Whether it's good quality or not, it's always got best quality on it. And since 2000 is the sort of the English counterpart to that, and it's relating to the fact that everything in England is since 1500, and that's somehow a mark of quality. So, but it's our dream actually to create things in India that are genuinely best quality. So that brings us to Apprentice, which is probably our latest project, actually. We were invited by the Arts Council of England to apply for a grant to produce some work. And we had to think of something that wasn't commercial, but a dream project. And since most of our clients are from different parts of the world, we decided that for a change we would try and find a client in our own backyard, and where we could have a meeting and just walk around the corner and have a meeting instead of traveling to India or America or somewhere. And Britain has always been known for gentlemen's clothing and accessories. I mean, the best suits, umbrellas, shoes are known to be made in Britain. And we wanted to work with people based in the City of London. And I personally have also had a passion for shoes because of their close relationship between materials and the human body. And I'm also intrigued by the fact that the shoe is something that you wear and it determines the way you feel and behave when you wear the shoe. And apart from that, I also love the combination of utility and sensuality inherent in shoes. So we call the project Apprentice, only this project is like an equal exchange between design and craftsmanship.
So we chose to work with John Lobb, who are probably the best bespoke shoemakers in the world. Lobb are a very, very traditional 5th generation of boot makers. And going to their shop and workshop in St. James is like literally walking into another world. They make shoes for, of course, the Queen, Tom Cruise. He sent his cast in the other day. He didn't. Princess Diana, Jackie O, and actually the other day we saw a pair of leather slippers for Nelson Mandela on Jonathan Lobb's desk. They also make orthopedic shoes for people who have problem feet. So there's this kind of mad aspect to them.
So I think when we started working with them, we very quickly realized that we couldn't do anything crazy or mad because we had to work with the materials that they're used to working with. And this really sort of defines the way they work, is the materials and processes. So we started to work on lasts that were provided by them and to try and think about how do we reconstruct the shoe components and move away from this idea of these sort of traditional motifs of the shoe as representing the way it's constructed. So we started thinking about how do you wrap the foot with leather instead of thinking about it as a stylistic exercise and one that has to relate to tradition and the upholding of tradition. So we had access to the most amazing craftspeople, pattern cutters, shoemakers, only applying a slightly different kind of methodology to their process.
Just to tell you that the shoes were made to our feet, and each foot is also different. So the lasts were individually sculpted to our feet and to the style of the shoe. So we did 4 pairs, which basically means we had 4 pairs of lasts, and each last was different because our left and right feet are never the same. And that's actually the pleasure of these shoes. The pleasure is personal. In this shoe, for example, we actually broke down the boundaries between the toe cap, which is the front, the vamp, and we kind of actually made the whole shoe in 2 components. And the shoe is asymmetrical, depending on which side you look at it from. And we also wanted to play with the fact that because the shoes are so traditional, we actually lowered the back of the shoe so you could almost wear it with very high trousers and maybe ankle socks.
And maybe
maybe no socks, which is unheard of with John Lobb. This is just some of the photographs of the making process. This was another pair that we made, which is called Saddle. And here again, we combine the components of the shoe. And because they're bespoke shoes, instead of a pattern in the front, which is called broguing, we thought you could have the initials of the person. So, for example, that says JL, which could be John Lobb or Jonathan Levien. I kind of wanted to do more celebratory shoes for the ladies' pair, but I quickly realized somehow that it wasn't appropriate to do an Indian wedding shoe with a very, very bespoke English shoemaker. So I kind of started off with wanting to create a wedding shoe, but I quickly decided to work very much on masculine shoes for women. So this was a pair called Silver Lining, which is very inspired in a way from a 20s shoe. But it was, again, kind of, for me, it was very difficult because shoes are so fashion-led. And how do you do something sexy that's not pointy and red and, you know, Sex in the City, but somehow still had a charm to it? And because these shoes, this pair cost £2,500 to make, a bespoke pair, you want it to last you at least 20 years. I do anyway. So it was kind of trying to...
Wear them.
I don't dare to wear them, you know. So it was really trying to find that balance between creating something that you want is desirable, but will also last you for a long time. And the hardest pair of shoe, although it looks the simplest, was the crocodile leather shoe, which I called perfect in the end, because I really wanted to design a shoe that didn't look designed at all, but was perfect in its proportion and its materiality, and the luxury came from the materiality and the shape of the last. So the last is the inside of the shoe that it's sculpted on, and that's what I really worked on. And I think
That's all, folks.
that's all for now.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nipa and Jonathan. We hope that soon South Africa will be able to influence some of the products that you design, and we can bring our local culture to some of the things that you create. We have a question for you from the audience. It is, a lot of the craft in India is quite generic due to tradition and the understudy process. How well accepted was your progressive design in the local production houses you used?
That's an excellent question. I think that when I first took the drawings to India, I think, and I asked them to embroider the game of chopar onto the day beds and the tools. First the women couldn't believe that people would be interested to buy the tools that they use. They can't see why people would be interested in their culture or in them. And my aunt kept saying, yeah, but these designs won't sell. Why don't you just do some flowers or something? That's what will sell in Europe. And I think they were pleasantly surprised at the response that they got for the work. And they used to keep saying, why do we have to sign our name? And I said, no, I want you to sign your name. And I think they're slowly starting to see the value of it. But I work with an excellent workshop. They make clothes for Miyake and Hermes, so they're the best that you can find. So the making was not difficult. They already had their standards.
Thank you very much. We have VJ Archery from Black, who will come and present you with your Anglo Platinum pin. Thank you very much.
Thank you.